delighted again to introduce our guests, Melinda Klein and Harry Debicki, are going to share with us on the topic of native spirituality and the three principles. I think this is something I've never heard spoken about before, and I know from both of them that this is a benchmark conversation. This is the first time that they've both spoken on this topic publicly together, so we're really excited to have them with us. And if you want to find out more about Melinda and Harry, you can do that on the website and the Telesummit on the Centre for Sustainable website. But just to let you know, Melinda is a couple of lines about Melinda. I know she's based in Kansas in the States, where she works as a family services supervisor. And I also know she's very well qualified on paper, but more importantly, she has over 30 years experience in human services. I think experience counts for everything. And the fun thing about Melinda is she calls herself a joyologist, which I think is lovely. Like my friend Amanda earlier on talks about happyology, called joyology. And then Harry Debicki lives in Vancouver in Canada, and his spirit name is Standing Elk. And Harry is passionate about his work and very passionate about his work. I just met both of them. They're new friends to me. And he has been involved in native communities, organisations and ceremonies throughout North America for over 20 years. So he's well placed for speaking about this topic. So I'm really excited to get going. Let's kick off with you, Melinda. I'm going to ask the same question as I think I'll probably ask to all our speakers, because I think it gives us a little bit of background on you, just to get us started. Kickstarters on your journey with this understanding the three principles we're talking about today, and native spirituality, and kind of how you've ended up on a call with us today.
All right, thank you, Sheila, and I am really delighted to be here also. It's a strange format, and I tried to join the earlier call too, because I click on the wrong thing. So I'm glad to be in the right place at the right time right now. So I think that it's cool that you mentioned about that I've been in human services for many years, and even longer than that, I've been Native. So my dad, Goodloe Eagle, is full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and married my mom, who was of German descent, and we were raised in a time that probably not so, like, it's more cool to be Native today than it was back then, and we've lost a lot of Native traditions, and so but they're there. I think that it's really, I just heard a thing the other day about when you pick a sacred plant called sweetgrass and you bring it to your nose and smell it, you remember things that you didn't know that you'd forgotten. And I think that when I was first in Diane McMillan's class at Washburn, she offers a three principles class as a advanced prevention class, and she is an old friend. And when I first sat in that class learning about three principles as uncovered by Sydney Banks, and reading Sydney's work and learning about transforming communities, really then, it was like that. It was like smelling sweetgrass and remembering what I didn't know I'd forgotten. And so it resonated for me, and it continues to resonate. And so when I do work in Native communities, or with a Native individual, or even with a non-Native individual, being able to touch that, like from that place in me, that I can share that with that place in them, that they know that I'm talking about truth.
Beautiful. Thank you, Melinda. So I'm going to ask the same question over to you, Harry.
What's the question?
How you've got just a little bit of background on how you've ended up on the call with us today. So just a brief history of your journey.
Well, in my journey, when starting on Salt Spring Island, there was a time where most people got left behind, because the journey went from spiritual to spiritual and psychological, and I wasn't ready for that transition. And then everybody jumped quite a far ahead, and I had this inclination. I said, I better smarten up and get going on something. I didn't have any background in psychology. I hated it, in fact. And so I can remember having almost like a spiritual prayer. And I went on this trip, and on this trip, I saw this forest. And on this forest, it was clear cut by white people. And it just it broke my heart just to look out into that mountain and see all this incredible destruction for greed and whatever else they call it. And a native woman walked beside me. We didn't say a word. We just both felt exactly the same thing. And I walked away saying, I should work with these people. And I did. And that was the start of my journey. And I had many talks with Sid. And it became obvious to me that his way of seeing life and the native way of seeing life had great similarity. And I was more interested not in the psychological, but the mystical side of life. And so we would talk, and he would point me in certain directions. And what was obvious was he was very interested in this area, very, very interested. But the people weren't ready to receive him, and I wasn't ready, to be honest, to take it out into that world. So I can remember coming into his office, and he had just been given an honorary pipe, and on this honorary pipe from this extremely wise Lakota woman, he had it there. And now a pipe is like, think of a PhD in our world, and then multiply it by 1,000 times. And that's what Sid was. He was an honorary pipe carrier. He never practiced the pipe, but it was given to him as a tribute to the truth that resonated from what he shared. And as he told me a story about first cause. He said, in the Lakota way of seeing life, they talk about first cause. This excited him tremendously, because that's what he was talking about, was first cause. And for all these years, that story has resonated with me, because I've been looking for what first cause actually means. And of course, Sheila, you understand, from time to time we catch layers of it, but it's an endless journey, this first cause. And it's been a benchmark. And one of the things I want to mention today is when he made a tape, a CD, it's called The Great Spirit. Very few people in the Three Principle Movement that's even know it's there. And on it, it describes, these are his words, the profound similarities between the three principles and native spirituality. And that's what I want to emphasize here. We're not talking about two separate worlds, talking about two separate truths. One truth. Sid saw the one truth. And if you really want to become an expert in these two worlds, bringing them into one world, listen to his CD and buy it from Lone Pine Publishing. So that's very, very important in this conversation, for people to understand. There's two bubbles out there. The Three Principles bubble seems impossible to understand until you go inside. And then the native spiritual world is another bubble, and it has a very mystical flavor to it. Very few people are inside that bubble, except, of course, native people are inside the bubble. And our job here today, if we are successful, is to bring those two bubbles and to show people how it's one bubble. But two separate bubbles. And when I talk to people in the Three Principles movement, I'm very, very discouraged, to be honest, with talking to them. I avoid this topic because it's not a topic that they are inside the bubble on. And when Jonathan Couchman, who's here today, and Melinda and I wrote our paper called Native Spirituality and Three Principles, and that can be downloaded from your website. I highly recommend it. It's definitely a state-of-the-art paper in this topic. I forgot what I was going to say. What was I saying, Melinda?
Pick him up, Melinda.
I can do a lot of things. Mind reading is probably not one of my gifts.
Yeah. So
You were talking about the wall.
I got it. Now I came back. Melinda brought this, and Jonathan brought this to me. You got to remember, they're native and I'm not. And what they said, what the feeling we got where we were looking for the solution to helping both communities understand each other, and it was each had to take a step towards each other, not just one has to move in a direction. And generally speaking, the three principal community has been so powerful in penetrating certain areas, but this one, they have to take a step. And if they want to help, they're going to have to grow. And to grow, they're going to have to understand what this similarity that Sid intuitively understood. He had no problem with the two worlds. Let me tell you that right now. Obviously, he had no problem with the three principles. And when he made his CD, he had no problem talking about the origin of the core understanding of native spirituality. He had no problem at all because it's just one truth. And so he was an expert, even though he phoned me up 3 minutes before he made the CD, asking me, what is native spirituality? And so I gave him a 3-minute course, of which he read a couple of phrases, and then he just talked. He just knew what it is. And that's where we have to evolve. We have to evolve how Sid sees it. And it's that way in every area. So Melinda, maybe you could tell that. Melinda has an incredible about medicine and innate health. Can you bring that in now? That would be a fabulous introduction to where we're going.
I can. Well, I think that, Harry, what you're talking about is when we had conversation, and something that I love to talk about with other folks who are Native or have that understanding is that we might call that original medicine in the three principles world. Maybe we call that innate health. I think sometimes, because then I also walk the line of being a social worker as well, and we talk about it being the strengths approach. So whatever language we're utilizing, like it's an echo of the truth, as Sid would say, because we're pointing at the same thing. We're trying to uncover the same thing. And I do like to think of that as our original medicine. That's what we have to share, and that's what we're uncovering. If you're working with someone in a helping field, whether that be in recovery or in a social work, I work in child welfare. If you're working with students, or if you're a life coach, whatever that area is, there's nothing you have to give really that they don't already have. Like, you're just helping them uncover it. And for me, as a helper and as a Native person, that's really freeing. We don't have to give anything. We're just uncovering.
Yeah, Melinda brought us. What's that noise?
I don't know.
Melinda brought when we had talked that we wanted to share something relevant, she had talked to a shaman about the three principles, and she was talking to him about innate health. And he said, oh, you're talking about the original, what in the days we call this original medicine. So when we're talking about medicine, we're talking about innate health. It's just a different word for it. So don't get confused by the fact that it's got a new title to it.
Right.
And to be honest, medicine is an incredibly vivid description of innate health. And if the Native world is about healing, not solving problems. So if someone's got a problem, that's not a very important thing. We're talking about healing. So just what Sid was talking about. He's not talking about putting a Band-Aid on your sore. He's talking about, you've connected back to your spiritual essence. And I want to tell a little story in relationship to that, if I may. I went to a Thursday ago to a gathering in the first part of Vancouver. I do a lot of work in addictions and in the Native world, and And it was a native gathering with a very wise, a couple of wise people leading it. And there was about 200 people, I guess. They're all from the east end of Vancouver, which is the very seedy part of town. And there's a lot of pain and suffering. And they wanted to help that. And I came in when there was the drumming and the shaman and chief. He's both, but just again a change of the times. Shaman were on one world, the politicians on the other world. But he's wise enough to bring those two worlds together and lead the people in a spiritual way rather than into an economic way. So if you're looking for economic answers to the native world, forget it. You know, if you're looking for housing and land and stuff, forget it. It's the same thing what Sid's talking about. When they experience the spirit inside themselves, they're already heading in the right direction, and they don't need a lot of help. The native people, once they connect to it, they're there. The problem is they don't stay there long enough, but they're still there, and they step into it very, very easily. It's intuitive to them. You know, it's what Sid would call the intuitive mind. So anyway, so these people are there, and there's a lot of pain and suffering. I can feel it anyway. And in comes the bear dancers, and when the bear dancers come in, this soft healing energy comes into play, like you would have at a 3P conference, no different. And this healing energy would come in, and they danced around, and you can touch the bear and the bear power. And then after we did that, they laid some cedar down and they brushed us off, which is a bunch lined up with big eagle feathers. And after that, the drums are playing, and I could hear it. You see, before I couldn't hear it. It's important to understand when your mind is busy with white man thoughts, and I hate that word, by the way, but if you're busy with your ideas of what this world is, you can't hear the music. You can't hear the drums. You have to hear the drums. It's just, if you want to go to where they are, you have to hear the drums. You have to hear the feeling of what they're expressing. And so I went by the drums, and then an elder talked, and he talked. It was so ironical because he said his message was, inside of us is this medicine, this sacred medicine. We are that sacred medicine. And the more you feel that sacred medicine when you get out and share that sacred medicine with other people, the more people will be helped in this world. And it's you know, so it's the same message that Melinda had with her shaman friend buddy, and his talking. So we have this medicine, this original sacred medicine inside of us, and if we share it in a beautiful, beautiful way, we're going to get those beautiful feelings back. And that's just old wisdom. And in the native spiritual world, what happened was there was an enlightened lady. See, it's a female-based religion, Sheila. It's one thing to understand. All the religions are male-based. Native is woman-based, comes from a woman, female-based. And White Calf Woman was this enlightened woman. If you want to use that, she might have been a mystical creature. And she came into the world and taught the people. And I may tell this story a little longer, right? Because I don't want to dominate the time. But she taught the people, and she taught them about the original medicine. And she taught them about all the things that we teach in the three principles. And the three principles bring native spirituality into an even deeper level of understanding, because the native people are very, very practical. Would you agree, Melinda?
I would.
Go ahead, say a few words.
Well, okay. Well, I was just sorry. I was probably deep listening there, Harry, listening to you tell that story, and thinking about the spiritual aspect of the three principles, and how I think in native cultures that is the piece that they would be looking for. And Sid talks about it too. He's always talking about that feeling I'm going to mention Diane again because her and I do so many workshops and things together. But we've often had people after a workshop with us, they would comment like, I'm not sure exactly what all you were talking about, but I really I want to come back because I like how I felt. And again, in Native circles, they will look for that feeling, and it has to be about the feeling, or they will know that you're insincere and not genuine, and they won't want you to come back. I think that it's a little less in non-Native communities. We were, really on fire with a public housing, doing some training with them, and the person that was in charge of that came in and said, okay, I want you guys to keep teaching these 3 principles, but can you leave out that spiritual part? And we had to unapologetically be like, that's sorry, that's who we are. That's what this is. That's what's being helpful. And, so it's not just in Native communities, but again, if you try to talk with a group of Native people and you leave that aspect out, that you will run into trouble.
You haven't not a chance. So if you're dealing with psychological problems, which is, of course, they're as mired. This is a very traumatic group of people who amazingly horrific past experiences from the politicians and the priests. I mean, stories like a 12-year-old boy is afraid to go to the washroom. He has to pee in his pants because he can't go into the washroom because there might be a priest waiting for him. I mean, that's a icky story, man. I mean, so that trauma that they have you can get mired in that concept, and they're very backward in terms of the psychological side of life, in the sense that they kind of worship the white man is an idiot in everything, but in psychology he's an expert, type of thing. So they're not getting good stuff in that area. And of course, for Melinda, it's a totally different game because they're getting good stuff, and she's pointing them back to into the spiritual being that they are. And in that, anybody who's had contact with natives will say, that feels good. These people know about feeling. They know about silence. If there were only 2 principles, spirit, Sid, by the way, said, don't call you in the Native world, don't use the word mind, use the word spirit. So spirit and consciousness, if there were only 2 principles, the Native people would be so far ahead of everyone, it's incredible. But there happens to be a 3rd principle. It has a little bit to do with this thing in my head. And so that aspect, and that's what I mean, the 3 principles will take these people back to their original teachings, the ancient wisdom, the same wisdom that Sid's teaching, because it will reconnect them on all aspects, and they really understand oneness. So it's all one. And so those are not complicated concepts. Those are intuitive understandings, and they can't understand how you can't see that, type of thing. And they're right. How come we can't see it?
Yeah, we've been waiting. We've been waiting for you.
Yeah. That's good. And they like bad jokes too. So that's my ace in the hole. Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, guys, I've got a question come through that I'd like to read out to you because we're here to serve. So, I apologise if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Iwan Carlson. So he's asking, aren't we all in some way natives? To me, the notion that some are and some aren't is only personal thinking. Harry said that Sid understood the native spirituality intuitively, so then anyone can. Remember, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So he's asking for your thoughts on that.
Go ahead, Melinda. You try it. You feel that one.
Thank you.
He's so gracious, isn't he, Melinda?
Isn't he? Difficult question. No, thank you for that question. And actually, we all have a place that we're indigenous to. And so wherever you are, that is your place now. And we all are here now. I think Harry and I spent some time when we were preparing for this, talking about, because he's in Canada, so, and I'm in Kansas, and my people are not indigenous to Kansas. We originally started a lot further east and west of here, and then there was the Trail of Tears that brought them to Oklahoma, and then I was born myself in Kansas. So Kansas, I'm indigenous to Kansas. I think you do, you know, when you're thinking about personal thought, yes, that you're indigenous to wherever you're from at that time, but the land was very important, and the location, because location is also very much a living thing to the way of Native American spirituality, and probably First Nations folks as well, from my understanding. So I think just to clarify that, not that not that he's incorrect, because that, you know, it is a matter of personal thought.
And just to answer your question, on one level, the person said is 100% correct, and in my opinion, not totally correct on another level. But in the totally correct part, when I went to a Sundance, there was this very famous sculpture guy, and he did beautiful work, totem poles and different things. And his teaching was all from the old ways. He at 65, he was a fisherman, and he just said, I don't want to do this anymore. And he started to carve, and he's carving in the city, in his little town, and a German passes through and says, wow, that's incredible. I wouldn't mind one of those. Could you make one of those smaller one for me in Germany? He says, sure. And he made it and sent it there, and he got all these orders from Europe. And anyway, to make a long story short, he became very famous, got the Order of Canada, talked in the Smithsonian, is very, very famous, beautiful work. And when we met, it was automatic. He wanted to hang around me. We were automatically brothers. So on that level, the level of wisdom, at a certain level, we are all brothers. And he just hung out. And I want to emphasize, we were learning from each other, but not in a effort way, more in an intuitive way. And he continued to phone me and talk. We would talk, and he says, you're the only one who understands me. And so as brothers, we are all connected together on this, as Jonathan said, this global family. On another level, sometimes brothers don't understand each other. And the bubble that the native world is kind of quite a unique flavor to it. Perhaps one you haven't tasted before. You know, it's a little bit, all the bubbles of every culture is unique, but it's very, very a special flavor, and you can't pretend you're in the bubble when you're not in the bubble. But you can certainly, we can all agree we are all here to enjoy and appreciate and learn from each other, and to share feelings with Native people. Well, I'll have to say I've been very, very lucky. The only person I consider much luckier than me is Sid. I mean, his life was unbelievable, but my world has been very exotic, because I've been allowed to walk into these poor people's houses, and they give you what they have. The kids sit on your cheek, sit down on your lap, and they have your cheeks. They're big fuzzy cheeks, and they're just pouring love out to you. It's pretty contagious, I'll tell you that. Really lifts our human spirit. So we're looking for lifting our human spirit and seeing this global family in a beautiful way. The Native people have a lot to offer in this area, once they get their poop together. Yeah.
Well, you know, Harry, I think too, like, I really do appreciate that all of us being humankind, and we're, you know, global brothers and sisters. And I love that idea of thinking about sameness. But I also am like really mindful about the trauma, you know, the historical trauma that happened to Native American people, and what has kind of been inflicted upon them. And, you know, we've known for a long time, which I love to think about this in terms of today's scientists thinking that they've discovered these genetic markers that carry trauma, and they've identified that. And but Native Americans have known for a long time that what you do today affects 7 generations in the future. Excuse me. So I'm glad that science is finally catching up also. And I'm, you know, obviously really proud of my Native American heritage, and but also concerned. Like, we have a Native population that they're more prone to alcoholism, more prone to heart disease, more prone to diabetes, more prone to obesity, and a lot of that being linked back to the trauma that's happened. And, you know, the 3 principles being, like, they will even talk about in the Center for Disease Control, looking at these ACE studies and looking at, you know, historical trauma, is that that we can have personal thinking that can help us to, like, not enact that marker, not enact that genetic marker. So if we can have healing, which again is what indigenous cultures would say, that injury happened within relationship, and that our healing can also happen within relationship. So that's probably what we're all doing, is out having relationships and hoping for healing to happen.
Maybe I could give an example. What's that noise? Anyway, I want to. Oh, I'm gone, eh?
Yeah. You're gone, Harry.
The host has asked you to start your video. Okay. Oh, okay. There we go. One of the interesting scenarios is how do these 2 worlds help each other? And I'm going to give you a direct example, because Melinda described to a degree of feeling that has to be understood. If you're going to have compassion for the Native people, it's not just thought. There's something. I once said that to Sid, and he came back to me quite harshly, I might add. Shame on him, you know. And yeah, just a joke. But he said, "You didn't live it, Harry. It's easy for you to say." You know, so I just want you to know that Sid had great compassion for what Melinda's trying to describe over here. And when I heard their stories, it not only broke my heart, but it opened me up to feelings that I had to experience. But here's a story. That's the past, and it's horrific. Just accept it's really the white people did a number on the Native people, a bad number. And, you know, and you can sort of relate to it in today's world, how people can be as stupid as, you know what. So anyway, this pipe carrier asked me to, I'm a pipe carrier, it's not mentioned, and I'm a powerful pipe carrier in many ways, because I'm very secure in what it is, and the spirits talk to me. I'm not going to get into that type of thing, but just call it intuitive mind if you want, just instead of the spirits talk to you if you're having trouble with that. And he was afraid to pick up his pipe. Now, this person has a big spiritual feeling. This person is a beautiful human being, and he can help a tremendous amount of people with the pipe that he carries. But he was afraid to pick up his pipe, and I came in, and it took about 5 minutes, because with the principles you understand about fear, where it's coming from, and the image that is. And so he relaxed, and I started to teach him about the pipe, and the way I understand it, not the traditional ways of other people and what they want you to do. I am a pipe carrier within my own unique flavor, and I'm proud of that. And I'm also able to share the 3 principles in the pipe, because that's part of who I am. So anyway, we did this incredible ceremony, incredible teaching. And then a little while later, I came in to do another teaching, and he had this huge dilemma in his head. And that was, he's connected to a woman on another far away, but they connect to each other. And she is now, remember, this is not over the telephone, guys. She's they're connecting to each other, and she's going through alcoholism or some kind of drug-related scenario like cocaine or meth or whatever it is. And he could feel this bad spirit and come into him, and it caused him great distress. And after we talked, he suddenly realized that was that bad spirit that he was internalizing coming from the outside was actually coming from him. That it was his connection and his thought that did that. And when he saw that, he was free. Now, as a pipe carrier, you have to have that understanding, or else you're going to be drained and wounded beyond compare by all this heavy, heavy feeling. So he saw very clearly, and that freedom from getting caught up in the psychological problems of life, which he had all these hooks. So they got all these hooks, and the three principles frees them from all of these beautiful little hooks. And then when I told him how he teaches the pipe, there's a paper, I highly recommend this paper. It's called Sharing the Three Principles by George and Elsie. Put this paper out with and a bunch of other people. And they wanted to describe how to teach the three principles, not what the three principles are. It's an incredible paper. I couldn't believe it when I was telling them how to carry the pipe and how to share the pipe. I was using those points that Sid was teaching the 3P initial practitioners, exactly the same. It's just the same stuff. But if you get caught up in your own personal thinking, whether it's a bad spirit or it's a traumatic experience from the past, you're not sharing love and understanding with the pipe. Well, obviously that's no good. You're the other person's suffering, and you're bitching and complaining about your own problems. That's not a healthy way to share a pipe. So the two worlds became one, and it totally changed his whole world. And that was not a difficult teaching for him to understand. And one more thing I want to emphasize here. Melinda and I had an interesting observation about each other. When Melinda came to the three principles, it took her about 30 seconds to see the connection between those two worlds. And that shows how clear she was before she came to the three principles and what she understood. It's taken me 20 years to get those two worlds together. It wasn't so easy for me because the other world was very, very, I was very, very, I couldn't see. For her, it was intuitive. And that's just a credit to her, but it's a credit to her, who she is as a native. They intuitively understand what Sid's message was. It's spiritual. I don't care about all that other stuff. It's spiritual. It's spiritual, spiritual, spiritual. And if you're in anything else in the three principles, well, in my opinion, you're missing the feeling. So, of course, it's psychological too. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. But anyway, that's my platform, and I'm standing by it. And if I'm elected, I will run. Okay.
Just want to share with you that Iwan came back and he said, thanks for your input. I was thinking more about the spirituality than birthplace or origin. Native spirituality and 3P spirituality is the same to me. The principles are spiritual, which is what you've just said. Every human being is spirit connected to every living being in the universe.
That's native teaching right there. You nailed it on the head, Sheila. We all know that's true.
Yeah.
So you exactly. I'm really glad to hear you say that.
Well, that's not me. I'm reading out what Iwan has typed back into you. After answering the question, that's his.
Yeah. Well, is that Jonathan again?
No, it's Iwan.
Iwan.
I don't know if I'm saying it right. Iwan Carlson.
Okay, great. Well, whoever said that, Iwan, that's dead on, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You can't say it better than that. And that's all we're talking. It's simple. Don't get caught up in, he's got a pipe, or he's got this, or he's got that. Yeah, the smells are great, the food's great, the people are great, but it's simple. No sense getting caught. You feel secure within your own spirit, you'll do well.
Mm. Thank you. Melinda,
Mhm.
I mean, you may want to continue sharing of your own accord, but what's just occurred to me is that, you know, we're talking about creating transformative communities worldwide. So here we're talking about the native spirituality. So I'm curious if, obviously Harry's doing lots of work. He's been talking about the work that he's been doing with the natives. How about you? How about you? Are you doing anything specifically with natives, or is it the work? Remind me, are you in private practice? I don't think you are you?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
I wear. I want
to speak to that a little bit. I'd love to.
Yeah, I wear several hats, Sheila. So one of the jobs I do, I supervise adoption programs. So I supervise in child welfare. I have a small private practice where I'm doing one-on-one therapy with folks. I also teach classes at a university. So I have lots of opportunity. And then Diane and I do a lot of, and I think we usually frame it up. We don't have to do advertisement, like people just come to us. And so I spend a lot of time just being the three principles, or just being a Native woman who has this kind of understanding. And like you said, I do like to call myself a joyologist, just because I feel like I've been studying that for a long time, like maybe for a lifetime. What is it that makes people happy? And, you know, I remember as a child, I didn't have a lot of, like, maybe that somebody else looking at me would have said, well, what's she so happy about? Like, she doesn't really have anything. So sure enough, I went to college, and Diane McMillan was one of my first professors. And I learned in a class book that I was an at-risk person. Like, I'm at risk. Somebody should have told me that. That's what I said. I didn't know. Here I am running around being happy, and I should have been like somebody, maybe I should have been upset. So yeah, no, I don't mean that. I don't want to be upset. So I just have an opportunity to be me, and having learned about the three principles, and having also learned some ways to activate in communities. And so I, you know, when I say I'm a part-time practitioner and I do that work, turns out that a lot of the clients that I see share Native history. And so I do happen to, like, where I work in Topeka, Kansas, is close to the Kansas tribes. But I don't say, like, my shingle doesn't say Native American practitioner or healer or any of those things. But sure enough, all the new clients and all the new referrals I get happen to have, you know, Native American ancestry, or are interested in that kind of spirituality. And so that just happens. I think that the universe has a hand in that. So I don't have to put that out there and try to advertise in that way. It just happens. And I don't have to work at, trying to share the principles either, because every day I'm in relationship with someone. Maybe that's my staff that I supervise, or maybe that's one of my students who's having a particular hard time, or maybe it's just a friend who also knows the principles, and we can have some, my husband, we can talk about having some thinking about a certain issue that comes up, and understand that there are sacred wounds, and that there's wisdom within each of us. One of my favorite, I was telling Harry this last week when I talked to him, but one of my favorite things to do in a group of human beings, whether they're Native or not Native, is to ask everyone to point to themselves. Well, when we point to ourselves, we always point to our chest, to our heart, to the wisdom that relies here, even though people run around thinking that they are up here, like we act out of this. And so, like, it just shows you that instinctively we know where I am, like where my essence is somewhere that's not up here in my thinking. And so just helping people uncover that and realize that takes us down that road. And then people get curious and they want to know more, and they want to learn, and they had a good feeling and they want to come back to that, or they want to have that for themselves.
Melinda has a competitive advantage over me because she's native, and the people are naturally more comfortable with native. But I'm able to break that bubble. Bad jokes, like I say, go a long way, but they can feel the confidence and the security I feel in the native world. They can feel that. Very few take more than a second to realize that I'm totally comfortable enjoying myself in this area. And they can feel that I have a space that has answers for what they're looking for, because they are very mired in they go to ceremony because they're not feeling good. And ceremony, by the way, can really do a good number. Cancer can be healed, mental health, alcoholism, anything you name that we've been successful in the three principles, they have been successful in ceremony. So you have to understand, we're not talking about a different power. Sid didn't introduce the three principles because he wanted to create a form that we could follow. That was a necessity. But it was the fact that truth exists, and truth exists in the native spiritual world, and we want to be able to experience that. And for me, I had already gone inside when I went into native spirituality, so I wasn't following native spirituality. I had already gone inside. But what I noticed was they were coming at it from a little bit different angle, and I liked it. See, that was the thing. I'm not a big, Harry Dubitzky doesn't play games. I like it, I do it. I don't like it, I don't do it. I'm no more complicated than that, and I liked it. And I said, oh, this is no threat to what I know. This is just another angle bringing me a deeper understanding of what I couldn't get from Sid. Of course, you could get everything you want from Sid, and as I got it from a native thing, all of a sudden what Sid was saying made more sense to me, and that's forced me to keep enjoying both sides of the fence, because if you're learning from both sides, it's just fantastic. Right now I work in addictions a lot, and the native world. Well, they complement each other at a certain point. And yet on another point, one's totally clinical, big problem thing, and the other is mystical and surrealistic. And so I need that. I need the blends of all that. You do too, listeners. You do too. The more, don't get caught up in this ritual three principles stuff. That's not it. You don't want to have the latest version of a bunch of words and then say it to people and say, I'm ahead of the thing. That's not what Sid was pointing towards. He was pointing to truths inside you. Then when you speak it, it will mean something. It will resonate with you. Not that you can say better words than someone else. And don't follow other people, even though there's a lot of wise people in the three principles. Yes, yes, yes. But don't follow. There's only one teacher, Sid Banks. That's it. The others are good, really good, some of them, but they're not Sid Banks. Sid Banks is the real deal. And if you wanna get the best understanding of what it is we're here on Earth for, Sid Banks is the best elder around, and I know that, and it's carried me a long way because I've been so stupid, and I'm proud of my stupidity because I was able to navigate through all that crap to be able to feel free again, and wasn't so easy, but my heart was good enough to do that. Without Sid's teaching, I would never have made it. Never made it. And so what happened to me was the Spirit brings help to you, and that's really important. And when I couldn't communicate to the native people because I was white, they brought the pipe. Flying climbing squirrel, or Larry from Maximum Security Prison in Nevada, and I were writing 20-page letters to each other weekly, just devouring, sharing with each other And then all of a sudden, a pipe arrived, an amazing pipe arrived. Very, very powerful pipe. And I went, what is this? I'm not. But the moment I had this pipe, something changed in terms of my ability to communicate and relate to people in the native world. And all of a sudden, they were listening. And I went, oh, wow, this is very cool. And then all of a sudden, as the prayers went into the pipe became more and more powerful. But the pipe never became real until I had an experience where the pipe and the spirit are one. And the spirit says to you, yes, you are a pipe carrier. Any human being can give you a title. And we have tons of titles in the white world and in the three principles world. It means nothing. The spirit is the only thing that gives the check mark in the three principles world. And the spirit, when you hear Elsie and Chip talk, the spirit is what they're talking about, not the this stuff. And so it's the same in this world. So all of a sudden, when the spirit gave me a check mark, they said to me, Sheila, is it Sheila? Yeah, Sheila. This is what the spirit said, because I was really lamenting. It's a very powerful native way of praying, and they said to me, "You do your best, and we'll take care of the rest." And that's been my motto since then. All I have to do is my best, and the rest is taken care of. It's a beautiful way to live. That's all I can tell you. I didn't learn that from the three principles. I learned that from native spirituality. Sounds like the three principles, but I learned it from native spirituality.
Yeah, I was going to say that. To me, that sounds like exactly the same message.
It's always the same message. We're just too stupid.
And the truth comes from within. I mean, even Sid Banks talked about, don't follow me, I'm not the teacher. You hear something and, drop everything and off you go. You enjoy your life. So I don't think that, it doesn't. It's the listening that counts. It's not it's the hearing and the listening that counts. Comes from within, because the same people can hear the same message, but if we don't hear it within, doesn't mean anything, does it?
Yeah. Useless. Yeah.
Useless. So how about you, Melinda? Go back to you and asking you.
Which one?
Melinda. I was asking Melinda. Just going back to Melinda. Do you have any stories to share? Like Harry's been showing some beautiful stories about his experience with the pipe and what he's the truth that he's heard. How about you? Any life-changing stories? Not particularly with you, but if you want to share with you, about clients too, particularly in the native, because that's what we're talking about today: native spirituality and the three principles.
Mm-hmm. Well, stories. I didn't plan one, and so, or I didn't, plan what I'm going to say today, and so nothing is bubbling up for me right now. I keep thinking about this idea of a quiet mind, a quiet and reflective mind, which I know is it's one of the things in Native American spirituality. One of the things that you ask if you're trying to help someone, or someone seems to be suffering, that you would ask, maybe when did they first notice that they were having trouble with silence, and that we busy up our minds or we busy up our lives. And I see that over and over again, where people will their minds are really busy. And so then they get their lives really busy, or they buy things, or, they fill their life up with stuff as well. And I think it's interesting if we, can practice what Sid talked about in terms of having that quiet, still mind. And again, I have to say that scientists are catching up with that as well, when they're looking at when our brains function at their best, when we're, in the best part of our brains and make the best decisions, or when we are most likely to be able to pass a test or do well on an exam, is when we're calm, that's when teaching can get in. That's when we can be open. You can't possibly take on any new information if your hands are still full of yesterday's junk. And so constantly kind of practicing that and being reflective and just waiting for things to come. I think it's interesting when Harry says, you know, that it took him so long to get this, or that he's still learning, or whatever. But once I've made this connection, I have to say that I just keep getting reminders of it. The universe gives me opportunities and reminders of it every day. Interestingly enough, my daughter, she attends the Native University in Lawrence, Kansas. There's a really close by, and it used to be a boarding school where they, not to get into the whole trauma piece, but they took children from their families and sent them there. But my daughter attends there, and she's majoring in environmental science. And she had sent me this week a homework assignment she had, because she wanted me to print it for her. And then I'm nosy mom, and I start looking at it, and it's from a book that's called, I have it right here, it's from a book that's called Original Instructions. And then I can't help but, look at the very first line. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to tell you what it says. So the chapter that she had to read is called She is Us, Thought Woman and the Sustainability of Worship. So then I just look down and I read the very first line, and it says, where I come from, we like to think of our God as a woman, and her name is Thought. And then I was just like, of course, then I just devoured it because I wanted to see the rest of it. It's by a Native woman. Let me tell you her name because I want to give her credit. Melissa Nelson. It's called Original Instructions. And then she goes on to talk about how thought is not the thought in our heads. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is just because I think that I just wait and watch and things come to me. Same way that I have individuals of Native history that come, or that I've got opportunity to go and teach a parenting class at the nearby reservation and know people there, and exchange gifts, and practice Native American ceremonies. I've been to sweat lodges or fire walks, where you walk on the hot coals, and have been in that beautiful feeling, and know that the wisdom that lies there, that lies within all of us, is just waiting to be uncovered. And so stories, I got a lot, Sheila. So I could keep you with a lot of stories, one after the other. But I wanted to make sure that I shared, as that bubbled up today, like that was on my mind. So just as a confirmation of what we were doing is so real.
Right, just to relay it into Native spiritual teaching, Sheila, there's 7 directions is one of the ways, and that doesn't sound like 3 principles, except if you take the first 4 directions and call that form, north, south, east, and west, then the last 3 are the 3 spiritual principles of Native spirituality. This is what the Spirit told me anyway, and in relationship to that, we have Father Sky, Great Spirit, Mind, type of thing, the energy of all things, and connected to that is Mother Earth, or Mother Nature, and she is the expression. The spirit. The important word is Mother, not Earth. The Mother is the spiritual expression of the form. It's the Father is formless, and the Mother is the creation of the form here on Earth, with all her nurturing qualities and so on. And this is what a woman, from the woman teaching of the Native world, within the deepest bowels of the Mother, right at the deepest point, that where she connects to the Father, sounds almost sexual, to be honest. That's where the origin of thought comes from. That's Native teaching. That's very similar to what you were talking about, Melinda. And that expression of into form is the duality of life, which is a big part of the Native world. And the 7th direction is the spirit within. that where you see both worlds are within yourself. The great mind, the mother, of course, in Christianity is the son, and the spirit within yourself. And those three principles aptly describe exactly how we create our universe, with an understanding that thought comes from the deepest area between the mother and the father, originating at that point where they connect together, because they're all one. And one is a big concept that every Native person I know of anyway understands totally. Would you agree, Melinda?
I hope that I hope they do. It's definitely.
I'm saying they live every aspect of it in all types of level. They don't understand the connection between spirituality and psychology, and that's why three principles are so good, because it's a spiritual psychology. But they understand, they have a good piece of where it's one. And that's a message that Sid continued to express, and that's a message that every human being on this planet needs to experience. The more you experience this oneness, the freer you are psychologically. I mean, obviously, like what you were reading before, Sheila, if you have that feeling, you're going to have a connection to every human being and every plant and every rock and everything that our planet is. And most importantly, what I am. That's very, very important. Don't exclude yourself from this oneness. That's the problem. And in that context, the Native has a little bit of difficulty, because they've got a lot of busy minds. This is a very intellectual crowd, by the way. Very, very, very smart and very intellectual. Don't get fooled by that deadpan face. There's a busy mind behind there, and it's got some sharp observation. And they like to talk. It's hard to shut them up sometimes, to be honest, So you can see, for me, that wouldn't be much of a problem, because I'm such a small talker. But but it's this is a very, very intelligent crowd. They make good observations, and they're sharp. Once they get their feet going in a certain direction, they take a couple steps. There's no holding. They don't go 1, 2, 3 like the normal 4, 1, 2, 99. What are you doing up there? It's just they cut the feeling, and they're off, and the genius is exposed. It's beautiful, beautiful, and they take you. It's just the same way when I'm with my grandson. He's 2 years old. I call him Guru Odin, because every time I'm with him, he takes me into this high space. Well, I feel good. That's not so different than when I'm with natives, to be honest. I feel good. Well, I'm not going to complain about they're this or that, or they don't do this, or they don't listen to me there. Or if I feel good, I better say thank you. And I do say thank you, because they take me where I haven't been able to go without them. And that's a gift. Linda knows that's a big gift I'm talking about right now. That's a big, big gift. And it's mystical, and it's connected. Diane McMillan, I guess she's on here. I can't see who's on here, but she was so nice to invite me down to Kansas, and I gave different talks and so on, and all because of her, 100% because of her. And the last talk we gave was at Powhatan, which is a native reserve. And I had already done all my work and stuff, and I actually felt a little down. And I went for a walk, and I said, Harry, you don't get to do this every day. Why don't you just go for it? And I sat down, and I just went for it. I didn't try to. I just went for it, and I expressed from where I was at the highest I could possibly express. And after I left that meeting, that session, and they gave me a applause, and Diane as well. And when I left, I said to myself, well, if that didn't make an imprint, nothing will. Then I'm just useless, because that sure felt like the real deal. I left. I didn't hear anything, and then Melinda and I connected, luckily. And she told me she was working in Powhatan. And I said, well, there it is. They picked up the energy and it relayed over to her, and she's doing all the grunt work and all that type of stuff. And so there is that magical connection in life. And I like magic.
Mm.
Yeah.
Me too. I like magic too. I'm being conscious of the time, and I think it's time we've got to wrap up. Unfortunately,
wow, we're almost finished.
No, I mean, fascinating topic. Something that
There's no
I
one.
haven't heard. And you know, Harry, if you hadn't pointed out, you know, Sid's CD, The Great Spirit, I wouldn't have known it existed. Like you said, it's not very well known about. It's only very short. It's very short, but it's impactful. So that's something for people to be aware of, for sure.
And also our paper.
Yeah, and your paper's posted on the website. And now my next question is, I think Charlotte's probably got a slide for us, but how can people get in touch with you? And I think Charlotte's going to put the slide up, but you're welcome to tell people, but apart from the email addresses that are up there, is there any other way that people can get in touch with you that you would prefer, or is that fine?
I'd like them to go to my website, which is acttraining.biz. So you
There
see,
you go.
the ACT training is the same .biz, and that has all my information, including my recordings. I'm doing some amazing work right now with Greg Sushi and in addictions and so on, and that has all my information, including a couple of books I wrote a long time ago, and so on. Yeah. And
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And for anybody who has contact with the Native community, use Melinda or myself. Don't talk to us. And you know, with Zoom like this, there's no barrier we can't help. Like in the addiction, Greg does all the grunt work, and then I get on and we talk with a few of the clients, and it's fabulously powerful. And then he goes back and does his thing. I'm not in there to take over for him or anything, and I don't really charge for my services. So I feel free to use us. And in the Native world, it's asleep in the three principal things. We need a little juice. And we started addictions session 2.5 weeks ago, and we have 200 members. Unbelievable. If we started a Native thing, we'd have 3 or 4. You know, we need a little more action. And I'm going to take Marina Galan. She's exposing the three principles to the Native community, to the Spanish community, doing fabulous work. Angus and herself are just amazingly beautiful human beings.
Yeah, we've got Marina on later this week. So
yeah, well, listen to it. I'm telling you, she's really got good feelings. I really like her feeling. And Jackie Hollows is also, but they take it out to the Spanish community, and when Angus and I were in LA at the conference, we both had the same thought. It popped out of our mouth. The three principles needs a little salsa. It was our try. Let's get a little juice. Well, they need a little red as well, to be honest. And I'm so happy that the Spanish community is starting to embrace it. But you can feel the energy of these people. They're not, what has traditionally been what the community is, and the fiber of the community will change, type of thing. When Roger was here, his work with the African American people and whatever else they were was just blew everybody's socks off, and they were fun. We're talking life, and well, the Native world is not quite like that, but it's got. Take my word for it. Melinda knows what she's talking about. I want to emphasize that. I've worked with her on this paper and with Jonathan Couchman, who helped write this paper. And she knows what she's talking about. And Jonathan does too. He's just a little sleepier with it. But it's important. Go to ask her for help, and she'll take you a long, long way. And if you feel you want to talk to me, my door is always closed. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Melinda. I really, really, really appreciate you being here with us today.